What is up, Ravens flock? Huge shout out for your support for the 410 Sports Talk. James and Glenn are the best in the business. They're killing it right now. They love talking Raven talk. Make sure you go subscribe to their channel. Let's go Ravens. Big trust.
Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of 410 Sports Talk. I'm James Haskell, along with my co-host Glenn Martin. Glenn, no quote tonight. No Michael Scott quote. Couldn't find a good one that would fit on the screen, so I'm just going with the name, James Haskell.
Full name. I like
That's
it.
right, but I'm official. Right. But what we're here to do tonight is continue on with our positional battles for camp. We've been doing a few of these by now. We've got, I would say, 5 or 6 of them out. Now, and we're continuing through that process. And now we're focused on the safety group. And this is important because I think we have a unique, the depth chart will be unique for the Ravens as far as safety goes. The guys in the room, there's a lot of like niche guys in there. And then also some wild cards. But on top of that, Glenn, one of the things I want to talk about is, I think something really important is to realize how many safeties, but also how many defensive backs we've carried on the roster for, the past couple of years. So as we work through the safety position room, I think it's important also to consider how many corners, as well, we're projecting them taking. So I figured that'd be a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. So we like to look back in the last 2 seasons and use that as a way to gauge what they'll do this season. So just looking back last year, the Ravens kept 4 safeties when they broke camp. They kept Chuck Clark, Deshaun Elliott, Anthony Levine Sr., and Geno Stone. And with those 4, they also added 5 corners with Humphrey Peters, Jimmy Smith, Tavon Young, and Anthony Averett. So that's a total of 9 DBs on the roster last year when they broke camp, okay? And then the previous year, 2019, much different total number. So just in safeties, they kept Tony Jefferson, Earl Thomas, Chuck Clark, Deshaun Elliott, Anthony Levine. So they kept, 5 safeties the year previous. But even more surprisingly, they kept a lot of corners, Jimbo. They kept Humphrey, Smith, Brandon Carr, Anthony Averett, Cyrus Jones, Justin Bethel, and Iman Marshall for a total of 12 defensive backs. So they kept 9 DBs last year, 12 the year prior. So that tells me that this is an area where they feel like, it can be anywhere between them. It could be one less. It could be one more. This is one of those areas where we could see a big change in either direction this coming season. So, Jimbo, I also wanted to give you, before we get started, the current list of safeties or guys that we think are competing at safety, because some of these guys are listed as DBs on the Ravens roster right now, and then we can start going into some predictions. So, of course, they have they got Anthony Levine Sr., Chuck Clark, Deshaun Elliott. They got Richards, who was on the team last year and has now an 8-year veteran in the league, which is crazy. They got Geno Stone, Nigel Warrior, Ardarius Washington, the fan favorite to make it as an undrafted free agent. And then the rookie DB, as he's listed currently, let's see, Stevens, who we're still not really sure exactly what position he's going to fill. Is it going to be corner? Is it going to be safety? Is it going to be both? And that remains to be seen. But Brandon Stevens is certainly making the team at one position or another, being as though he was a 3rd-round draft pick this year. So we got Stevens, Levine, Clark, Elliott, Richards, Stone, Warrior, and Washington all competing for the safety spot this year.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting because, like you said, the range – and the reason I wanted to bring up the total number of DBs there is because the volatility here is great to where, the corners will have a certain impact on the safeties as far as number of guys we can keep. So you and I both projected 6 corners.
Yep.
And certainly we're going to have, if the total low end is 9, the high is 12, we'll have more than 3 safeties because just like you articulated, Glenn, we're already obviously Elliott and Clark, Levine Sr. and Brandon Stevens. That's 4. They're locks.
They're locks.
So that's 10. That's 4 safeties as we list them, and that's 10 DBs in total. What it really comes down to is how many more we think that they're going to add and who. So that's what I have my ideas, but I want to get yours first. Give me your take here, Glenn. Who you going with? I'm really interested.
And it could also be, we could be completely wrong in our prediction on corners, and that could totally throw off our total here. They could, they could keep just 5 like they did last year. They could keep 7. I mean, we really don't know, because either way, it's going to be a difficult cut that they're going to have to make, no matter who they decide on. So like you mentioned, Clark, Elliott, Levine, and Stevens are locks. So is that all they're keeping? Are they keeping 5? Are they keeping 6? And so remaining on that list that haven't secured a roster spot of Jordan Richards, we have Geno Stone, Nigel Warrior, Ardarius Washington, all competing for that last spot. My take on this position is Ardarius Washington. I got to imagine when he was the number 1 most coveted undrafted rookie, the reason he chose to come here, the reason him and his agent decided to ultimately sign in Baltimore had to be because they foresaw a path to the roster for Washington. When you're an undrafted guy, it's almost a bit of a benefit than being in the 7th round, as a draft pick, because then at least you can choose where you go. And I believe him and his agent chose the Ravens because they saw the lack of depth at safety, certainly as a true safety, and not a guy who can do a little bit of both, like we see in Levine Sr., who does a little bit of safety, but also does some nickel corner, does some linebacker in the dime, and can be used. Same with Stevens. This is a guy who we saw, in college when he transferred to SMU his final year. He played some safety, played some corner, so he's a more versatile guy. But Ardarius Washington, to me, seems like the type of guy, unless he disappoints, would be the kind of guy that they would like to have on the roster in case we have an injury at one of those top 2 guys. Because Clark and Elliott, if either one of those guys gets hurt, we don't want to see Levine Sr. in there getting big minutes at a key position at safety, because that's just not really a role I think he'll succeed at. Now, Stevens could prove to be that guy, but at just 1 year at the DB spot after,
at corner. I mean, it wasn't even safety.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a lot to ask Brandon Stevens to now make that jump, not just to the next level, but also he's pretty much changing positions as he played running back for the majority of his football career growing up. So I think it's a lot on him. So I think Washington makes this roster because of the fact that there's just not a ton of depth, quality depth that are true safeties, and I think he's just that. He obviously has knocks because of his height and weight, and he's not a big guy. He's a relatively small guy, even at the position he plays. But he's always been able to overcome that. And at 5'8", 176, he's still a good tackler, and he's a good blitzer. I mean, we had a guy on that covers TCU as a former safety. It played in the same style of defense and is now a sideline reporter, and he was raving about Ardarius Washington. So I know it's a little bit premature to pencil in an undrafted guy to the roster, but that's my prediction. I think they go 5, and I think they go only 5. And I know that there's, Geno Stone is a guy they brought back after he was claimed by the Texans, but I just can't imagine him. There's so many guys they want to get on this roster, corners, wide receivers, offensive linemen.
Fullbacks, plural.
Yeah, got 2 of them now.
Right.
That I just can't imagine them choosing Geno Stone over one of those other guys.
Even like a young lineman. We've drafted a decent amount of young linemen that, like you said, they'd probably prefer to have on the roster. That's a great point, over a guy like Geno.
Yeah, and linemen are coveted league-wide. They need linemen. So are you going to cut a Ben Bredesen, who looks like he's kind of on the bubble right now, for a Geno Stone? I don't see them doing that. I see them taking their chances and seeing if they can get Geno through the waivers. But if they were to keep a 6th guy, I would say it's Geno. But in my opinion, Jimbo, they're only going 5, and it's Washington.
Wow. So you're ending at 5 and 11 in total.
Yep.
That's really interesting. Gosh dang it. I was really prepared to give Geno Stone a lot of love and go with 12. Mm-hmm. The indicator to me for Geno, and really the staple to my argument, was going to be the fact that they went through the effort of bringing him back.
Mm-hmm.
Right. They went through all that. And I don't think they would have done it if they didn't like him.
Yeah.
The Ravens franchise, the Ravens front office really values guys that they take in the draft, because I think they trust themselves over other teams. And so, boy, I think that you've convinced me, though.
Nice.
I think you've convinced me though that it's going to be 11, and I have the same 5. I was going to add Geno was going to be 6 for 12, but I mean, at the end of the day, I'd rather have a Ben Powers. I'd rather have maybe even a Bredesen, who I think has had more snaps on offense than Geno did on defense last year. Even though he only came in like heavy packages and stuff like that, I mean, he still was on the field more.
Yep.
And was a much higher round draft pick.
Right.
So you've convinced me successfully that we are going to have 11. I like your breakdown. And it's also a great point that you bring up that while on the depth chart, we might see Clark and Elliott as A and B, 1 and 2, and then Levine right behind them. And but really at the end of the, and even even Stevens, I think at the end of the day, though, one thing I will say, and I'll declare here, is that I think in the depth chart, safety on defense, excluding special teams, I think that our Darius Washington goes into the season as our true number 3.
Yeah.
I think he's going to outplay Brandon Stevens as a true safety right now. I think, and I think that I think Anthony Levine is not at a point in his career where physically he can keep up with the mandates of that role.
Yeah. Yep.
So I'm with you. 5 is a good number, and I think Geno slips to the practice squad.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Houston
Texans might want him again.
Well, but they didn't tender him. So
that's true.
Obviously, if they wanted him, they would have put a tender on him, and that's why the Ravens were able to get him back. And I think that Geno's a guy who's probably really loved by the film guys, like by Joe Ortiz and guys that just love football and the scouts and stuff like that. But he's probably not as loved by I hate to say it, but I don't think the coaching staff loves him as much as the scouts do, because when the scouts turn on the tape and you look at him from Iowa, he was what the Ravens need. He was the center fielder. He played on instincts. He did a lot of stuff in coverage that they really would want out of a safety. But I just don't know if with his limited physical with his physical limitations, his lack of top end speed, his negative length, which is so rare in today's athletes, that I don't know if his instincts are enough to overcome those. But I'll say this, there's no reason to think that all these guys are also going to get through camp completely unscathed. There's also that possibility that Washington could get banged up at his size, as we've seen Tavon Young struggle with that. And I think his size has something to do with it. And then, Stevens, something could happen there. Levine's getting older. So if there's any injuries, then it's a different story, because then you might have to rely on Geno, who we saw in 2 games last year. You might have to, ask him to come in and play. So you might want to try and keep him on the roster and not expose him to waivers where other teams can grab him. So, but if these guys all get through camp healthy, I mean, I'd have a hard time. Now, any chance Washington isn't what he's hyped to be? Because there has to be more. I mean, when we talked to the guy, he said basically the size is the only reason he wasn't drafted. But in the 7th round, I mean, nobody took a shot on him even then. You tell me it's just size? Maybe you're right. But any chance that Darius isn't that guy and Geno takes his spot at number 5?
0% chance.
Man,
0.
you love this guy.
Well, you already know he's stolen my heart. He has stolen my heart. I truly believe that in 90% of American sports, there's a bias towards guys that are on the smaller side. Mm-hmm. And that's all right, right? But the thing for me at the end of the day,
guy.
What'd you say?
It's coming from a smaller guy.
It is true. but certainly at the same time, I think this is one thing that people fail to forget. Whatever your body type is, and this also includes Geno, is that like you've had it your whole life. Mm-hmm. You've learned how to play with it and use it to your advantage and understand what your disadvantages are forever, right? Like, so I think that sometimes people get in their head and they focus on the wrong things and not the tape enough.
So you're saying size doesn't matter, Jimbo? Break it down to the people. Size doesn't matter, right? I mean, you've been playing with it your whole life. Right?
Well, when it comes to sports, sure, which is what we are. We're a family show.
Okay, that's right. Sorry.
We're a family show. But yeah, I have a really funny story that I can tell that I'm not going to. Anyway, all right. So that's what we both think. Glenn, you have officially swayed me.
Nice.
and maybe on one of our live episodes, I'll tell the story, but certainly not right now. So make sure you tune in. But let us know what your thoughts are, guys. Do you think that the 11 is the total, like the 6 corners and the 5 DBs, or excuse me, the 5 safeties? 9 to 12 seems to be the range of possibility for the Ravens. Give us all your thoughts, who the safeties are, in the comments below, and we'll talk to you guys soon.